Okay, we have a pack of Kodak Premium Picture Paper, 100 sheets high gloss. I have a gigantic pack of this because I used to print out a lot of prints, digital prints way back when, but somewhere along the line I stopped making a lot of prints from my photographs, and I don't know, I think these days most of us just kind of utilize our photography for online viewing purposes. And this paper is really good for certain types of stamping processes, but it's not great for others. If you try to blend a lot of dye-based inks on this, it's really not a great surface for that because it's so absorbent and the inks dry so fast, at least on the surface, okay? The emulsion coating on this really kind of grabs it, and it's really kind of hard to blend those out. If you're using things like stipple brushes where you don't need to kind of physically blend the media very much, okay, or apply a thick layer of it down, then this paper is fine for that. But what I also really like photo paper for is photo stamping or just stamping onto the scene and coloring with, alcohol markers, because the alcohol markers are very surface-oriented when they dry. They don't absorb into the pulp of the papers on glossy or a glossy cardstock or photo paper, okay? And I like to go in and manipulate my scenes quite a bit with the colors used on them, okay? So I like that surface-oriented aspect to that, and alcohol markers work fantastic in that type of methodology. Okay, so this is the Autumn Bank left here. There's an Autumn Bank right as well. But I'm going to use this stamp with the Autumn Brook. Okay, now I just inked that all up in black, and then I used a green, olive brown marker over the, not the entire amount, but I just wanted to get a little bit of variation, green variations, maybe within that black, okay? Now I plan on utilizing kind of some fall color schemes in this scene, but in the impressions themselves, I don't really try to go for a full range of autumn colors. I have some negative space in here, open areas, for the purpose of going in and coloring those trees that are autumn colors after making my impressions. It's just easier to do it that way, I feel. Okay, large stamps get a good amount of pressure used on them. With photo paper, your dye inks really kind of stick to it, it's almost like it dries there instantly. And so just be careful when you pull this off so, it doesn't kind of warp your paper. Hold it down and pull up like that, okay? Now we have this other one right here. And what we'll do is we'll stamp that in there. We're going to overlap that impression by, I don't know, probably about a ½ inch. Let's color this up the same way. I didn't get a lot of variation of green in there. My pens are a little bit dry. I need to go in and re-ink these. I do have a re-inking video on Marvy pens. I can't re-ink them all because not all of these, like this olive brown, doesn't come with a, you can't get a re-inker for it. But, if I have a pen like this and it's kind of dry, okay? Now this one right here is olive brown. This one's olive green. Olive green does come with an accompanying re-inker if you want it. It was more, not really for the pens, but it was designed to use with the Marvy matchable inks, which they still sell. So all you do is you just pop open this back portion and you fill up this little reservoir right here with ink. So something like this olive brown, if I fill it up with an olive green, hey, close enough, but it'll be some fusion of olive green and olive brown, but, I don't know. If they're close enough, that's fine with me. I wouldn't fill it up with like a red or something like that, but... Okay, so overlapping about a, ½ inch, ½ inch or so into the previous impression so you don't get these gaps in between your impressions. And if you get a gap, if you're being too kind of careful about it and you see it like a, like a puzzle to be matched up edge to edge and, oh, I got a space in there because I didn't overlap enough. Just fill it up with something else, fill it up with another piece of, the, one impression or another, okay? So see that right there? That, whatever, the meeting of the two images, that's fine, You just overlap it enough. And I mean, when I say that, I don't mean just enough. It's, there's plenty of leeway. 1/8 of an inch to a ½ inch or so, okay? That's why you don't really need, like real careful positioning on this. We're not trying to go like this isn't a jigsaw puzzle. And the reason being is these are not outline designs, so it's not like an outline where if you get crisscrossing lines like that, okay, it looks awkward. These are tonal designs. Not only that, I put a lot of consideration into the designing of these stamps for that blending aspect of them. So, it's not kind of a precarious exercise to blend images together. Okay, now see this one right here. I just used this portion right here to get this tree right here. Okay? All right, so that is my, kind of my main, I don't know what you would call it, sequencing in terms of the overall composition. 3 impressions, 2 different stamps. Okay? All right, now that could be our, our main focal point. Well, I guess it still is, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some foreground right here. And I'll bring in some boulders with lichen like that. Okay, some different rocks right here, like you're something to stand on as a viewer of this, whatever, fictitious scene. Maybe I can bring in these rocks down here. These are the rocks and leaves. I don't use this one enough, but I really like this stamp. I think my black pad's getting a little bit dry. It's been really super arid and dry out here in the West, as witnessed by so many due to the wildfires out here in the West. But okay, that's black right there. I could give these leaves on here a tinge of red, like they're turning with the season. Let's try that, okay? Let's go with a little bit of olive brown on here first in the leaf portion. You don't have to be real careful about coloring these either. You kind of, it's this random kind of application of media. I mean, you can even call it haphazard, okay? It all works. You don't have to be so careful about this style of stamping, and it's actually probably more conducive to be a little bit looser with your application. So that's harder for some people to do because you're so careful about image placement, stamp positioning, coloring within lines, okay? That's important for outline designs, but when you're blending things together like you would find in nature, you just, you don't have to do all that, okay? You have to do it in some, different forms of, like I said, certain types of stamping, but nature stamping, scenic stamping, not really needed, and probably not as conducive again for the overall kind of continuity of everything. Okay. All right. Now this one, I don't know, I've used a little bit of a different color scheme, but let's just go for another impression of it here. I can go lower, you can go higher, you can have this one kind of spread apart if you want to, or whatever you want to do. Generally, in Western kind of perspective, the higher up something is on a composition, the farther back it represents. Okay. So we get that. So see this right down here? I have a little bit of variation between that impression and this impression. They look like, I don't know, well, I mean, they look like the same stamp, but they look a little bit different visually here because one is colored different than the other. Okay? I mean, you can do all kinds of things. I could layer this now. I can go in, let's do this right here, instead of just saying. Okay, now see this one right here. Another thing you can do, see this right here? I'm going to go in the foreground. I'm going lower down. Okay, but just doing it in black. So you get kind of another impression of it down here. So you have it dark and light like that. I don't know. I mean, it might be good to have some of those leaves in different areas, okay? So this is a good example of using portions of your stamp. Okay, I'm stamping most of it off my scene. I'm just using the top portion of it to bring a little continuity between those leaves over here and putting some over here. You can't really see it very well, but here, let's make it a little bit more visible. All right. One of the things about what I'm saying about all of this and scenic stamping is, not having to be so kind of tedious. This is your mask right here. I'm just matching up a piece of ripped paper towel. And let's go with some of these leaves on the other side of the boulders with lichen. So we're kind of sandwiching that rock in between some of those leaves. Okay, see what that did? Here's the rock right here, and here it is over here. But doesn't it change the spirit of it a little bit? Yeah, quite a bit, actually. It looks more dimensional now. And see, you can really expand the look of that certain rock just by merging it with other types of imagery like that. Okay, all right. I mean, you can add more, if you want to or whatnot. But I think that's good right now. Okay, let's see here. This is a lot of open space, and I don't want to just do all alcohol ink blending, so I'm going to put some of this alto cumulus sky in here, in other words. Or another name for an alto cumulus sky is a mackerel sky. And I don't want to go too... I mean, we can go with a sunset type of sky in here, but I think what I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to go very conservative in the sky because I want the colors of the autumn imagery here to kind of be the showcase of the color scheme of this. So if I have it sunset up there, and then these in here have the, you know, the golds, reds, oranges, and all that, you know, type of color scheme. The two areas might compete, or it might just kind of wash out. Not that it wouldn't look good, but let's just kind of focus on the, you know, certain colors in one area for right now. Okay, this is a Memento Summer Sky. Just use any kind of light blue that you want to, if you want a little bit of variation. Boy, my pens are really dry now. These pens are probably 25 or 30 years old at this point in time. I would re-ink this kind of steel gray with like a really light blue. There isn't a re-inker for this one either. But like I said, these, you know, those pens are like 30 years old. They've had these other types of casings on them for, I don't know, like 20 years. So talk about old. Okay, now this, I went with a little bit of variation up there, but you can see some lighter blues and darker blues, but it's also kind of in the design itself. It's solid and kind of a little bit airier down this way. Okay, let's see if we can get this going here a little bit faster. Get going with the coloring of the scene. Okay, same thing. You kind of overlap your previous impression. I was kind of tempted to just go for a second impression, but when you're stamping on photo paper, so much of the ink is really pulled off the stamp and absorbed into the paper very quickly, so it'd probably be advised to just go for one impression and re-ink before you go with your next impression. Okay, now I want lighter impressions down here in the water, but I do want my water to be somewhat reflective, so why don't we go ahead and I'll just blot this off once, stamp it down here. I want to get the spirit of the sky down here in the water, but just not too dark. I don't know, maybe that was too light. Okay. But, yeah, let me go for that again. Let me just go for another couple of impressions down here. Okay. I think that looks about right. It's a nice shimmer to it, huh? All right. That is it on the sky and reflections. I was about to say this is it on the impressions, but I think if I lay down some alcohol inks on here, and then I try to stamp on top of those with some additional imagery, I don't think it would stick, so with this type of stamping and coloring process, I would recommend getting everything stamped, your entire composition stamped first. Like a lot of times what I do is I go for looking for some pens here. I go for kind of mid-ground, foreground, but then I'll also add in some additional foreground right at the tail end of the process, and I'll use things like versifying black inks to get a really dark, crisp impression, and those are the last things that I do on there. Okay, so let's go back. I was thinking I was done with my impressions, but let's get some foreground going in here. This is, we'll create an overhanging tree limb right here. Let's put a little bit of that, kind of that fall foliage color scheme into it, or at least have it reference it a little bit. You know how I said usually the higher up in the composition goes, it represents something farther back in the distance, but this tree here, okay, this overhanging tree limb, This represents a tree that is kind of close to us, where it's like standing underneath it. So the trunk of this tree would be below. Okay, let's go for a few impressions. I never know what I'm going to get with this kind of blending like this, okay? Because it is so random, and it really depends on how wet your pad is, how wet your pens are. If your pens are wetter than the pad, then you're going to get more ink off your pen, okay? But if your pens are really dry, kind of like these, are somewhat dry. They're medium, well, they're dry, medium or so. Then a lot more of the pad ink is going to be on there. It's whatever the wettest one kind of wins out. Alright, do you see that kind of variation of red up there? I do like my foregrounds to be pretty dark, so it appears as though things are closer to you. Usually the darker it is, the closer it is to us, because as we look out into the distance, we're looking through kind of all that atmosphere, and light is getting kind of broken up in the, I don't know, moisture molecules, dust, whatever, in between you and those more distant objects, so things usually aren't quite as dark as they would be close up. A green tree 5 feet from you is going to look different than an exact same type of green tree, a mile from us or something like that. It'll look much lighter because the light's reflecting off it in the distance and coming back to your eye, but through all kinds of different sediment in the air. Okay, let's see. I'm going to overlap this a little bit, get a little bit more condensed there. Isn't it kind of framing things off? These compositions look pretty good, just, without even an additional coloring in there. So it's kind of fun, utilizing your coloring directly to stamps like this. You can get a lot of variation that way. All right. Let's go for a little bit of thicker area up here. I want to really close that area off a little bit more. Okay. I apologize for a lot of videos where I kind of zoom in and I forget about it and I'm working off camera or something like that. Let me see if I can go for another impression back here, and let's see if it looks... Yeah, that's not too bad actually. So that kind of lighter impression right there next to that one. Looks like it's a little bit further off. For some reason my camera keeps stopping during this video. I'm not sure why. Maybe there's something to do with the heat or something. I don't know. Shouldn't be. It's not that hot. Outside it is, but not indoors. Okay, we got a big canopy of leaves up there, huh? But it's kind of all in the spirit of this piece, being that it's all about these deciduous trees in here. Okay, now I have this leafless pine here. I like to go for some... I like to mix things up in my scenes. Having kind of dead trees with kind of more full, lively trees, it creates a nice contrast, and it makes the full seem fuller. It makes the colors seem, I don't know, more colorful, having something dark in here like that, okay, like in the foreground. I don't know, it brings a lot of variation into a piece. Yeah, you stamp it up high, you stamp it out low. I could keep using the same one. I'm going to use a smaller one here, just for a little bit of variation. Okay, and just again, I'm still using my black dye-based ink. Use whatever one you find works the best for you. It seems like everyone has their favorite black dye-based ink. It's kind of their main ink pad, their main black ink. The VersaFine pigment ink on photo paper, you have to test out what photo paper you're using if you're doing it on that. It dries on my glossy just fine. It takes a while though. You have to wait, sometimes even a couple days for it to dry. So I usually wait for for that, I don't know, the end process, end application of media or imagery to stamp VersaFine on glossy cardstock. But on photo paper, I did some impressions on photo paper. I don't know what brand it was of photo paper I was using, but it just never dried. Okay, so I would stick with your your dye-based ink for the photo paper. I don't know, but you can kind of play around with it and see. But I don't know. I can't tell you whether it'll dry or not. Maybe, I don't know, if you're in a real arid area, perhaps, but I'm not sure. Okay, do I want something else down here? It seems like I can use like a little, I don't know, kayaker or something like that. I think that might be kind of nice. We can have birds up in the sky. And again, a lot of times I'm just not really used to thinking about all these different considerations right in the beginning of a scene, because I often do, I don't know, like additional foreground imagery and focal points, birds, people, animals, whatever. I save that till the end. It's kind of fun working in this process, though, just kind of stamping everything out and just going in there like a coloring book practically and just coloring it in afterwards. And you can work different ways. You can do that way. I'm putting in some additional rocks into this water. Let's go for some really just faint impressions as well. I like textures in my scenes. Okay, so I'm just adding these tiny rocks down here. See that right down there? I think adding that in, it gives the impression that the water is nice and clear. Okay, we can see through the surface of the scene, or the water. And I don't know, that type of clarity is nice to have in a scene. That type of representation of the, I guess, the quality of the water. The clearer it is, the more, the deeper you can see into it, or all the way down to the bottom of this lake or stream or whatever it is. Okay, let's put a little focal point in here, a little kayaker going out and enjoying their time on the water. You put it right over here. I think over here going into the scene. Usually if something's pointing in, I usually have them pointing into the scene as opposed to, paddling out of the scene. Oh, you can do whatever you want. Sometimes it's just a matter of whatever you've left in the scene. If I had a tree over here, that would kind of eliminate this possibility of that. But all right, so anyway, I hardly ever look at a scene like this where it's just everything is conceived from a compositional standpoint, and all I have to do is color it in. Okay, now I'm looking at some of this. Alcohol inks won't smear water-based inks, okay? But if that water-based ink is still real wet, like there's a bead of some ink on here, like up here, I can tell that where I've really inked in with this, I can tell that's a little bit wet up there. And if I go over it with some color, that will smear, but not because it's physically mixing alcohol and water. It's just because that water there is, it's still built up and a little bit moist. So I tell you what, I think what I'm going to do on this one, I think I'm going to allow this another 5 or 10 minutes to dry and set up. And then we'll go on and we'll start to color this scene with alcohol markers. Okay, I've given it about 5 to 10 minutes, and let's see if this is dry on here. I'm kind of surprised at some of this ink. Actually, now that I look at it, maybe it wasn't so much wet, more as the ink, I think it just built up and it kind of dried in a little bit of a kind of a puddle. And it looked a little bit extra shiny, but I don't know. Let's see how it goes. Okay, now I have different alcohol inks brands here in the Marvy and Shuttle Art. You can use your Copic markers, whatever you have. But what I'll show you is my general color scheme that I'm going to be working in. And I do grab my pens and I like to kind of line them up in a general order. I mean, this is not like some kind of scientific, type of organization and process or something like that. It's more visual, okay? But I'm just thinking about oranges, reds, pinks, whatnot. Here's some Shuttle Art ones. These are the Marvies. I'm kind of avoiding this type of color right here. It is just so light. I don't know, maybe I can use a little bit of it or something and blend it out a touch. Let's just go ahead and include it in. And, I don't know. Like I said, I just make things visual, okay? I'm thinking of, okay, now the blues are going to be more for the water and sky. So let's take those out. But I think that could generally look somewhat like a fall, full color color scheme. And then I have kind of the earthy tones, the browns and whatnot to mix in here. Because if you go like way too bright everywhere, I tend to think it looks a little bit too much. It's just, it lacks a certain type of kind of natural harmony, maybe. So, let me just get all my pens here. If all of you have all of your pens beautifully arranged, which I know a lot of you do, maybe you don't want to grab them all out, but I would suggest, grabbing out a few at least and working with them that way rather than just kind of, grabbing one pen at a time. That way, when people do that, it tends to be a little bit more theoretical or logical instead of making it kind of visual, seeing all the different colors you can, work with. But, that being said, one of the nice things about the alcohol inks is that they become somewhat surface-oriented, okay? So, even though you're going in here and coloring a certain color, it is very surface-oriented, and you can go in and kind of reinterpret the marks that you've already applied. So, in other words, if you don't like what you see, you can kind of go in there and, I don't know, you can blend them out. I don't know if it's kind of a removal but it almost is in a way. Okay, now I like to start kind of light. Now this is just a warm tone of apricot. I figured the apricot could be a nice kind of neutral between greens that could be used and the yellow, orange, red type of color scheme. Okay, now one of the things about water, and I've drawn it into the design itself, is you can go in and have those reflections of those fall types of colors down here in the water as well. Okay. All right, so we have that kind of going. I don't have it everywhere, but it's kind of scumbling around. I mean, it's kind of going like this, you can color in little areas. It looks like this, these types of marks like that. That's kind of the motion I'm using. I mean, if you want to use more of a smoother mark, you can do that too. There's no set formula of something like this in terms of technique, at least that I know of. Okay. There's a little bit of a sandy shoreline on here. On those two designs, you can color those in like that. I like to bring continuity between different areas, so this is kind of a mid-ground area. I guess this is background. But you bring some of this color into these rocks, okay? Like that. Just so all these different things just don't look so kind of visually kind of separated, unrelated. Okay, that was, what was that again? Apricot, okay? This one is Camel. I think it's a little bit of a browner tinge, okay? See it like that. It looks really kind of weird, I know, right now, but like I said, there's a high degree of blendable, I don't know, properties to the surface and media combination, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay, see that? It's just kind of going around, adding it here and there. I don't know, I guess there is a slight reason to some of this, but I'm just going for kind of a general blend right now. Okay, there's a yellow, super bright, huh? But I said there's a certain type of reasoning, but I'm just going for kind of a general blend right now, and I don't know, I kind of figure it out as I go along. Like I said, I don't do this too much, although I should. It's really fun. Okay, here's the reflection. Gotta remember my reflections. Okay. So it's kind of starting to come around. Here's some more of that camel. I thought I'd use some of it down here on these rocks in the foreground, which I didn't before, but... Okay, let's bring some up into these trees. I guess one of the big things that I'm not doing is I'm not going for kind of just this vast area of tone, where I'd be filling in everything. If I filled in everything, I think it would just be harder to kind of blend everything in and create that continuity. All right, this is a pale green, okay? And, you can, since it's so pale, you can, bring it into the trees, which are more, fall colored than green, but this is a very pale green, so why not use it down here in these grasses? A lot of times in the grasses and fall types of colored areas, the low-lying bushes on the ground are all kind of, that spectacular fall color as well. Now, if you don't have certain colors, I'm just winging it here. I don't know which color combinations are going to work really well. And I don't do this very often, so it's just kind of you're watching me kind of experiment more than anything. This isn't kind of a lesson on, okay, use this color, use this color, use this color. I'm generally working from light to darker, but I'm also kind of working from dull to bright. But then I go into the bright areas again, and I kind of dull them out a little bit just to kind of blend them in, because sometimes they can look too hot. Okay, this is Biscuit. It's a little bit more mellow. This is real similar to the apricot. I probably don't need to use this one. Okay, let's start moving into some greens. Again, I use that pale green, but let's see. Okay, I have a little bit of here's a melon. It's a little bit of darker green, not much. It's just like a little tint of green. Not exactly scientific coloring, is it? Not trying to stay within certain lines or areas that are, yeah, it's not a kind of a restrictive type of process, in other words. You can kind of just put it wherever you want. Blending in a little bit. Not a whole lot yet. I'll try to blend this all in a little bit later. See this? I'm overlapping some of the things that I've already applied, some of the colors, and then some of the colors I'm not. I'm kind of working around them just so that there's kind of an overall variation happening. Okay. And this, to me, I don't know, when I'm working this way, the things don't really look good to me until I kind of get towards the end, because everything is kind of, yeah, disparate. There's not a kind of a nice cohesion until I get more colors laid into it and I start to build up somewhat of a, I don't know, kind of a coating, I guess you can say, a buildup of colors as well. And then I think it kind of comes together pretty well. I feel that, I don't know what color this is. What is it? The sixth or seventh color. I feel that it seems like it's starting to come together a little bit more now. See, I've gone back to a yellow, and I'm kind of blending out some of those other tones and using it over, a pretty good range of the imagery. Where you overlap yellow over green, it doesn't look, yellow. It looks more like a yellow-green. But you can kind of go in here and really work it, and then some of that green is removed if that's what you want to do. Okay? Because the inks are sitting on the surface, so when you go over them like this, they do go back into solution, so you can go light into dark. And if you kind of melt, dissolve away, the undertones, you can kind of spread it around and actually remove it. It's one of those few times in stamping when you can actually do something like that. You can go on to a media and do the subtractive type of process. See, this looks terrible right here, just as is, but we're not going to leave it like that. We're going to do that, and then we'll go into it and just kind of spread that orange around. You can use your blender pen as well, if you have one of those for your alcohol inks, alcohol markers. I'm going to go in for a little of that orange. See, I can dip this into the orange up here. I can go down here and probably introduce some of it. Introduce some of it down here in the reflections, I should say, the water reflections. Okay. Ooh. You know how alcohol inks on the surface like that? I put my fingers over here. It's not getting all over my fingers, but I can just feel it's kind of sticky. Okay, coming around. Let's go for a little bit of a lighter. I'm going to add a little bit of some highlights down here on these bushes, these red leaf bushes, you know, to give it a little bit of variation. Kind of doing this little type of thing, a few dots like that, to get a little bit of a kind of hint of that color. Or I don't know, maybe it's more than a hint. Where you put it on, apply it over the top of, say, yellow or something like that, though it doesn't seem to be as dark. I don't know. Maybe it's mixing or something. Okay. Kind of a cheery looking scene so far. Let's knock it down a little bit then. Okay, so this is a brownish gray. Let's kind of hit some areas in here and go for a little bit of shadows, like underneath the trees. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. It's kind of hard to see because we have all these colors, but you see these darker areas underneath here? Okay, those are the shadows underneath the canopy of trees or whatever. See down in here? So in these areas like that, what we can do is we can add shadows down there, and that will give those trees a little bit more depth, I guess you can say, opacity, because you're saying that these trees cast shadows, right? That's what we want. And it also, doing that, it kind of creates that separation between the trees and the kind of the grasses underneath it. You know, so doesn't that look better? But I didn't go with black, okay? I'm just going with the brown. It's within this color scheme right here, okay? And you can go, there are some shadows that I've drawn into the design itself, and you can go in and just reiterate it with a little bit more tone, okay? Let's go into these trees right here, underneath them, with some shadow, okay? And we'll see if it makes the trees stand out a little bit more. Same thing over here. If you want to create a little bit of separation between some layers of trees, hit the shadow areas with, you know, some darker tones. Down here, here's this tree over here. You can't hardly see it, it's kind of mixed in, but again, adding that opacity and depth to that area. In other words, I'm just going in and you can just, anything that's dark, you just, you know, put some extra ink and make it even darker. Okay? What I mean by that is, if something's dark, I mean the impressions of the design. So you can see all these little areas like, okay, like this right here is dark and underneath there. So you just color this in. There's some darker areas on the shadows down here. You can just go in and reiterate that. Okay, I missed some areas right in here. I'm going to fill in some additional treetops in the distance. Okay. I think I want to go a little bit more gutsy. I think I want something like a brighter red in there. So let's build up to it a little bit. Let's build up through kind of a darker orange, maybe. That. Okay. It's just so that all those trees aren't exactly the same. You want continuity, but you also don't want monotony either, potentially. Okay, let's see if I have kind of a... that's kind of a little bit more of a reddish orange. Actually, that might be the best color, instead of going to like a crimson red. Kind of those pops of red match that red down there a little bit more. I don't know if it matches it, but I don't know the word is. It references it, I guess. I don't know. Okay, so we have those darker, colors down there. Now again, let's go in and just kind of mellow those dots of that darker red out a little bit and kind of blend them in. I like to blend my colors in using a color out of a color scheme more than the blender. Okay? Because I usually don't want clear. I want a color, but I just want those darker ones to be blended in with those colors, with those similar colors. When you're using these pens, you can almost kind of make things, a little bit more kind of impressionistic if you want to. I think it's a little bit too bright in there. Okay? So, what we'll do is we'll just go in again. Just keep going a little bit lighter and lighter, okay? I mean, maybe it ends up with the blender pen, I don't know. It's a fun way to work. I really like kind of moving those inks around, and if you've, used those alcohol inks kind of in a built-up type of process before, you know what I'm talking about when a lot of people do those backgrounds with those really cool alcohol ink kind of swatches, and you know how that edge of that, puddle, it builds up a little bit of a thicker buildup of that ink, and you get that kind of, I don't know, area ring or whatever buildup. That's kind of what I'm going throughout this piece. I want that kind of buildup to be on a lot of the different imagery. Alright, I'm looking for a greenish tinge again. Let's go for some more of this brownish gray. Okay, now let's go in and let's bring some of this blue into the composition. Okay, there was a little bit of that buildup of that red on there. It's not physically mixing with it, but I do feel it's kind of smearing it a little bit. It looks okay though, because the sky, it just looks a little bit violet where that is. Okay, this is a really pale blue right here, so it's not making a huge commitment to the, the blue hue by utilizing it, so it's a really good one to start off with. See, I'm just kind of darkening the edges around here, kind of making the perimeter a little bit darker. Now, in this mackerel sky, see, I can kind of put some streaks across here like this and get some color in there. That mackerel sky, the cloud alto cumulus, is a nice one to use up there if you want to just be, somewhat kind of random in your application of media over the top of it. Okay, let's go in the water now too. See, blue over, a really super pale blue like this, used over the top of colors like this, or you can go right into, blue and oranges wouldn't necessarily mix fairly well, but if you're going with a super light blue like this, light in value, it really allows you to, use it quite liberally and right over the top of all those other colors, okay? Alright, I am getting some smearing here. I wouldn't say it's too obtrusive, but again, a lot of that ink is, I guess, it's just sitting on the surface, okay? I don't know, it could work in your advantage as well. Like up in here in the water, doing these streaks in here, kind of as it's pulling some of that color out, I don't know, creates a decent harmony within that space. I know you can't see it on this video too much. I can barely see it here. It's very, very subtle of a blue tone. Let's go a little bit darker with this next blue, okay? You know what I mean about kind of moving from lighter tones into the darker tones, okay? This one is just a little bit darker. Okay, there's the other one. Here's this one I'm working with here. It's working in some of the shadow areas or around on the perimeter. Create a little bit of shadow for the kayaker. Create these streaks like this, going across the water. See, I'm bringing some of this into this foreground rock as well to create a little bit of a tonal continuity in terms of color schemes. I don't want the rocks to be, necessarily completely blue, but having that blue tinge in this boulders with lichen down here looks pretty good. See, what I'm doing is this type of thing. I'm not going like this and then up. I'm doing these streaks like that, okay? And when I'm doing it from the other side, I'm coming in this way. Okay. It's kind of fun. It's like adult coloring book or that type of thing going on in terms of having kind of an existing composition and just going in and kind of defining it in terms of the color scheme. Okay, I think I'm really kind of mixing in with some of that yellow up there, because when I go over it with that area and then I do another streak, it's like a green streak in here. But like I said, you can create some continuity that way. All right, there's a little bit of a sandbar right here. Okay, and I'll bring some of that in here as well. Going for a little bit of variation in that sandbar, kind of removing some of that ink a little bit. It's kind of building it up, removing. But it's also kind of adding that extra layer of tone. All right. All right, so those trees in there, I need to create that variation. So let me see. Let me go and is this my blender? No, this is pale green. Let me find my blender pen. Like I said, I don't use this too much. So, oh yeah, that actually does. It removes quite a bit of ink. Just having, just clear liquid in this one. It's almost like I'm using an eraser. What I'm doing is I'm on the lighter areas of some of these trees, like the top or something like that. What I'm doing is I'm going in and removing some of that ink, so that it looks like they're being top lit. You're introducing kind of back into that colored piece the element of directional lighting. Okay, in this case it's just coming from above, so on the top sides of some of these trees you just kind of remove some of that ink. Alright, kind of coming around. That was the blender. Let's see. I'm going to use the blender on some of these rocks, right? Ooh, that's too much yellow. I guess take your blender pen and clean it off a little bit. Alright, there we go. Okay, I think that is pretty decent in terms of the color scheme that I want to achieve. Look at that kayaker down there. The kayaker has a little bit of area on them where they could use a little bit of color of some sort. I want them to stand out a little bit in here, so I don't know, you can do a couple different things. You can put them in something red. Or I can put them in blue to kind of harmonize with the area. I don't know. Purple, I don't know what color do you want. Let's go with this kind of bluish tinge right here. A little reflection in the water, the same color. Oh, that color is pretty nice. Let's use a touch of it down here in these rocks, in the darker areas of the rock. See, I do that. I keep doing these little things like this, and I keep running it over different areas just to create that little bit of continuity between different areas. Okay, so I put this little color, it's kind of a violetish on them, and I put it down here in these rocks right here. Can you see it right there? And then a little bit over here. Let's put it down here in the shadows. Okay, let's make these shadows a touch stronger in some areas. How about a little bit of a stronger vignette? Left and right top corner. Bottom corners as well. Okay. All right. That is it in terms of that coloring. Okay. Let's go ahead and grab some of these pens. I'll show you what pens come in this Sharpie pastel water-based paint pen kit. These, right, actually there's one more. Okay, it's something like that. Or it is that. These pens right here are really fantastic. They're paint pens. They're water-based paint pens. And they come in. I don't think they come individual. They might, but I've only seen them in a 5-pack set. You do have to shake them up to get that paint mixed up. While I'm doing that too, we have our Meowsome acrylic paint pens. Okay, these are the same pen, just one of them's working and one of them isn't. You really have to shake them up every time you use them, even if you use them pretty often. If you don't shake them up, you can start using them, and it would be a little bit of a more translucent color because it's not mixed up so much. But I tend to go for some pretty decent opacity, so I do mix it up. Okay, so what do you use these things for? Now these colors are all kind of in that color scheme. I didn't use any pinks, but I like to go for some additional textures, okay? And, you know, when we were talking about highlighting, we can go in and highlight some of these objects right here. Okay. So top surfaces of things. If the ink, alcohol inks got darker than this pen, then I can go into those areas, and this would represent a highlight. Okay. And these are pastels, so they are fairly light. But perfect little kind of shimmering touches on these trees. See this right in here? It's largely undefined now with all that alcohol ink work, but this is a way to go back in and just, you know, redefine your kind of leaf branch structures within these pieces. And that you just go in and add these little highlights on the top tufts of you know, those areas within the tree. You can use gel pens too for something like this. Here's some highlights down here, or the reflections. Okay, you see this right here? Some highlights up here. You can put some highlights down here. There's these areas along the shoreline. You can go in and kind of redefine some a little bit if you want to with these pens. Now see, you can also say, well, if you redefine it, then why not just don't color it to begin with? Because if I do that, then I'm really having to work around a lot of things all the time. I don't want to have to mask anything off. So I just redefine it right at the end with some additional pens. Plus this gives it an extra texture too. So it's not as if, oh, we're just trying to eradicate something that we didn't want to begin with. No, it's, you know, those colors underneath there were the things that blended everything together. But this is just going back in and kind of adding some definition back into it. But I don't know if you can see that in there. Doesn't it look more shimmery now? If I had a pastel yellow, that would be perfect for this, but that didn't, something like that didn't come with a set. Okay, now, I didn't really use pink in here, but pink is, you know, it's like a lighter version of red, right? So, we have these red kind of foreground images. I mean, if you want to, you can kind of go into these areas like this and, you know, these, I'm not going to put a lot of this in here, but this pink could represent an area of the leaf that's kind of being illuminated a little bit by light, because it's a lighter version of red. In this case, I think kind of a crimson or red, lighter red would be maybe better than pink, but this works as well. Okay. Pink. Take a look at the overall. It's coming together now, a lot more. This, you know, like I said earlier, it's sometimes when I'm doing this type of process, all these other colors of inks, it doesn't really come together. It doesn't. It's not going to look resolved with the first couple coatings, and sometimes not. You know, to this degree. You know, until you get, you know, a little bit further along. But the big point is, and I really don't know what these are going to look like. When I start out, oftentimes when I'm even midway through, I'm not really sure of how it's going to look. Sometimes I don't really get a good glimpse of it until kind of at this stage of the game. But I can really see it coming together now. Putting in some greens. You know how, we have some greens over here, and how we're creating that little bit of continuity. So you put some green dots. I wouldn't want to put too much like green alcohol marker in there. You know, it might stand out too much, but you can bring some of this green, a few dots of it. It's not a big, huge commitment to that color within that space that is not green, so, okay. Here's purple. Do I want some of that? I don't know. Maybe not, but... Okay. Now let me try to create a, let's say some of those leaves are in the water. I can put some of these little dots down here. Maybe that can represent leaves in the water or something. I don't know. And here's blue. Blue is where? It's in the sky and land, right? But let's bring a few little touches down in some areas for the sake of continuity. I say that word too much, but it is kind of important, and it really emphasizes the repetition of color, pattern, etc., blending of things, not being afraid to go into certain things and to reiterate, okay, and again, this is not some kind of formula thing. I'm just kind of looking around at this thing, at various objects and areas, and thinking, okay, I'm not thinking of this right down here as a rock. I don't know. I guess I am to an extent, but I'm looking at more in terms of color. I'm looking at this area down here, and I'm saying, okay, is there enough of this in this? it doesn't mean I want to color this yellows and reds in this rock, but this little subtle tone of peach right here is also up here. So in a sense, I've introduced this hue down here, but it's just in a very subtle, very light version of it. But again, now when we look at this, see that area down here, it's a little bit more related to up there. So you just kind of put things, similar types of textures, patterns, colors everywhere. Alright, this is a white paint pen. I feel like I'm endorsing this pen company because I say it so often, but I am using it in every scene, but I'm not endorsing anything. It's just, this is what I happen to be using. Okay, let's add a little bit more of highlighting. This is going to be the lightest thing, so if you really want to bring some highlight into something, white would be the one to do it with because it is so light. Really trying to get these reflections in the water hit with some good highlights. It kind of creates a little bit of separation between the reflective areas of the water and just open water. Where the blue is. So you create continuity, but then you create a little bit of separation. When you're doing all this type of detailed work, always kind of look at it from a distance and see how your marks are affecting the overall appearance, because when we're working so detailed, we tend to be focusing on really small areas or just objects, but you want to have a good idea of what you're doing is what it looks like in the overall. Okay, now let's see. I like to go in and kind of define some of these trunks sometimes. I turn it upside down because it's easier for me to do the stroke like this. I've drawn these these little trunks in the design themselves, so you just have to kind of look for them in order to reiterate them. But see all those trunks, doesn't that really kind of bring those trunks out? Doesn't it look really dimensional now? So I've kind of done that little line up that way, and then I've done the line that way. Okay, now we have those lines on those trees in the background, continuity. Yeah, you can put some on things like these foreground trees. I don't have like it's just a straight line, all that, you know, I just do a branch here or there. Kind of makes the foreground branches stand out a little bit more. See this branch or this tree dead tree goes up here. How it doesn't really stand out very much. So you can just go up it with a little bit of white ink like this. Okay, and see how it stands out a little bit more? And then you can put it on some of the secondary branches or branches and from the trunk. So you're not trying to just outline it. You're just kind of going along with some of the branches here and there. It makes it a little bit more three-dimensional too. You know, when you introduce lighting onto something. It's saying that it's not just like a silhouette. Like a shadow puppet type of creation. Alright, it's really coming alive, I'd say. Some specular light that's kind of shining off the surface of the water. You have some up in the sky if you want to. Okay. All right. All right, now, one of my favorite things to do and my favorite techniques is to take some white pigment ink with a cotton ball to create some additional textures and lighting within the piece. Alright, now my pad is kind of a medium dry, so I'm not going to get a lot of blobs of paint if I just go directly from pad to scene. But your pad might be really, really sopping wet with ink. So you want to blot some of that off a little bit before you apply it, okay? Because you want it to be where you barely can see any ink being applied with each tap, okay? And when you do it that way, you'll have a lot of control over the amount of ink you apply. The worst thing to do is like blob, 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 okay? You want it to be where you can tap for a while and apply, and it just slowly builds up. It's like dry brushing this media in there. All right, now the place where I'm going to do it is where light meets dark, okay? Because this is white, if I put it in, there's not really any real dark areas of this scene, but there are darker areas, and I don't want that in those areas. Or I don't want too much of it. Okay, now see, as I apply this to some of these leaves right here, see where the leaves are getting a little bit lighter? So it looks like lighting is, they're kind of being illuminated. In this case, they're being bottom lit. I'm putting this over some of my trees here in my scene. See these trees right here where they get a little bit more distant? Let's put those in some haze. Remember I was talking about kind of lighting, or the higher up in the composition something goes, the more distant it is. Well, I'm putting some distance between these trees. Now these ones are lower on the top, but see, the tree trunks are lower. Okay, so these ones represent more distant trees here. So let's put a little of that pigment ink back there. Now, see, doesn't that make it look a lot more depth? It's kind of a subtle. I mean, it's not like, okay, that's miles behind there, but these trees right here, which are lower than these ones, look closer to us, which they're supposed to be. But look at that trick right there. I mean, it is so easy to do. Okay? And just that little bit right there really changed the spirit of the depth within this piece. Okay, now, these trees right here are farther back, right, as well? So, let's take some of this and apply some of that in there. And now you get this area right here standing out a little bit more. Okay? Let's put a little bit of lighting onto this kayaker, okay? We won't put too much. I don't want to put them in like bank of fog, although you could. But see that little area in the canoe or kayak? Doesn't it look, like it's a little bit more dimensional? Okay, let's put a little bit of this misty fog down here in the water. We'll make the reflections a little bit less intense, vibrant, just to create a little bit of separation between the reflections and the objects reflecting, they're reflecting. Okay. Isn't there kind of this kind of illumination type of thing going on now with the lighter areas like that? I don't know, I think it captures a slightly different spirit when you introduce this kind of misty fog into the scene. Now, if you've done this on glossy paper, it feels a little bit different on this photo paper. I feel that the ink is applying a little bit faster, and it's probably more fixed. If it's glossy cardstock, you can just wipe it off if you don't like it. But this one, I don't know, with that emulsion coating, I don't need to remove any here, but if I needed to, I don't think it would come off very easily. So again, just apply it very slowly. Okay, let's put a little bit of lighting into these trees right here, because that area in the background is a little bit lighter. But see, there's some kind of like that, I don't know, that illumination happening there. Let's illuminate some of these leaves here a little bit more too. Like they're capturing some of that light. Some of that light is hitting them. Yeah, you can put it in here in the foreground too if you want to, a little bit. I mean, you can put a lot if you want to. I don't think I want to, but right, I think that is about right. I kind of like that kayaker a little bit, and a little bit of that lighting like that, soft lighting like that, right at the front of the kayak. But there we go. See that kind of little oscillation between a little bit of pigment ink over the tops of some of these. And doesn't it change the spirit of those, even the foreground right here, by having a little bit of that pigment ink on some of these objects right there? You get crisp and soft all in that area. So it's not just all monotonous in terms of the coloring in there. Same thing right here. See, it changed the depth and everything. And it changes, it extends, I should say, the textural quality of the overall piece like that. By having the kind of some softer areas within the piece, it really expands the visual language in terms of textures that are present. Okay, so anyway, I think that should do it there. Sometimes after I'm done with these scenes, it occurs to me, oh, I could have done, one thing or another differently, or in addition to usually. But photo paper. It's perfect with alcohol inks, isn't it? And alcohol ink coloring. I really did a lot of work in here, but it's because I don't know really what I'm doing. If you're really practiced at alcohol ink coloring, you can do this much faster than I did. So I just kept going in there, and I kept reworking it, adding light tones, darker tones, light tones, darker tones, light tones, spot bright tones, blending out again, light tones again, blender pen. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to get the feel of it, so I'm kind of stumbling around the entire process, but you can really bring it together. I felt the gel pens really brought it together. You can see all those gel pen highlights within those trees right there. And then, of course, redefining those tree trunks. I love doing that with the white pen, in there. I think that really gives it a lot of dimension and brings kind of a crisp mark into these areas where everything kind of got a little bit muddled with all of that color being used. So, just really fun stuff. And I don't know if it's like a coloring book, but it's kind of the spirit of doing a coloring book type of application on your pieces, which is really fun. So if you have any questions, drop me a note in the comment section. If you have some photo paper and you've tried this before, let us know how it worked out, or if you're going to do it, give it a try. It's really just fun, and I think this one looks better than the some of the pieces I've done in the past. So maybe I'm learning a little bit of something. I think it's the layering though, and then the paint pens that really brought this one together. So just really fun stuff, and I really like I said, the end result. So thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you like this video, hope you like, share, and subscribe.